The English Concertina was invented by Sir Charles Wheatstone back in 1827. Well, the forerunners of it. They were always the best engineered of all the instruments. All the other competitors all worked in Wheatstone's shop at some stage in their career and then drifted away and set up on their own. But I suppose for commercial pressures, they never quite made them in quite the same way.
Perhaps a kind of cultural cutting edge of modern Victorian, early Victorian technology. And there seem to be so many new discoveries taking place in the arts, new movement in music generally, the way things are developing, cultural changes, social change taking place. Perhaps the high spot of the Industrial Revolution, as things were really getting going, the populations were moving and increasing greatly. And in the midst of all this huge social change, historical change, came the little concertina playing its little part. And actually, you say Victorian. In fact, the movement towards the development of the concertina really took place before Victorian times. By 1837, when Queen Victoria came to the throne, the concertina was more or less fully developed. And in that year, 1837, in fact, it received its first main public performance at the Birmingham Music Festival. You're right, it came over initially in its Chinese form, brought over by explorers who'd been to China perhaps in the 1750s, around about that sort of time, in the form of the sheng, which is there in the case behind me.
And he was looking at the actual fundamental physics of what was going on. And I think he cottoned on to this free reed thing, and his contemporaries must have thought he was potty. Completely mad. There were bellows on everything. As I say, there was a bellows-powered fiddle, which was a fiddle body with a rod instead of a bow, with a bellows on either side. And it pumped air through little jets across the strings. And where you fretted it, there were like brass bars that when you fretted it, opened a valve and let air come across the strings. Because the patent, his original patent, is a new way of making music by passing air over springs and strings. And it's apparently valid in England and Wales and the town of Berwick-upon-Tweed. Why, we don't quite know. I think Berwick-upon-Tweed's still at war with Greater Germany, I think, because it has a very peculiar status. But that's an aside. But his contemporaries must have thought he was mad. But his family had an established instrument making firm, established in 1760, and they made sextants and compasses and engineering equipment. So he had the actual family background for light engineering. Wheatstone's invention, if you like, wasn't so much the free reed principle, it was the keyboard. You really give up sometimes as to sort of what it is that's actually caused the problem. And Wheatstones always were renowned for being the best in terms of engineering excellence. And when you see how, I mean, I try and make them in exactly the same way. Not because I think I should reproduce something, but I can't see the point in changing the method of making something just because there might be a modern material or a modern way of doing something that somebody suggests is better. I haven't yet found a better way of doing the jobs than was originally done. Looks okay. The only materials that I use that Wheatstone wouldn't have used are engineering plastic for the stems on keys. It's a much stronger material than boxwood. It's easier to use and it retains its dimensions. It doesn't move. And the only other material I use are modern aliphatic resin glues. Modern glues are far superior. Basically, this is a hexagonal instrument, so it's the medium scale reeds. The buttons that you see poking out of the ends, it's a simple mechanical lever, and when you press the button, it lifts the pad that lets air through one of the holes into a chamber and sounds the reed. Pretty simple, doesn't it? Sort of just a wooden handrail. If you look at the blank, it's a piece of mahogany with a piece of hardwood on the top. In this case, it just happens to be rosewood, which is all stained black. There's a brass piece let in there for the screw, and of course you can't see that when it's all done. That's plastic, it's not ivory. It's fake ivory because you can't use ivory. Well, I wouldn't anyway. I think it's obscene using ivory, other than old ivory. But then if you use the old ivory, it just encourages people to go and use new. I have to make all of these little fittings. You can't buy them. No. But you look at the materials in a concertina. There's ebony, rosewood, nickel, gold, leather. It's pure Victorian engineering. I mean, even this handrail, a little brass plate let in there with 2 screws, so that there's a thumb screw can go into it. Well, in this day and age, you'd bang an insert in there that's already threaded. It'd just be thump, and that would be it. And that's a typical, if I would put it, Victorian way of going about the engineering. Labour was cheap, and they did things in what some people say was the correct way.
English and duet concertinas and aeolas, Wheatstone. This is 1932. Well, this is a magazine called The Rhythm.
Music magazine.
Yeah. Unexpected. That was their address then, 15 West Street. But it would have been at this location that the concertina was brought to prominence, and this is where all the selling, this is where Rigondi would have come to pick up his instruments and where he had his first lesson in the early 1830s. Wheatstone's was there, as far as I know, from the early part of the 19th century right the way through until 1890s, and they moved then to West Street, which is up in Charing Cross Road. But that has entirely changed. It's now an underground car park. The actual names, you see, were part of a whole movement, almost like a Greek thesaurus they would have got, these inventors and musical instrument makers and so on, to see possibly what sort of Greek words they could apply to all these new inventions they had, all these little fingering systems, the free reed systems. So you've got things like the mellophone was a name that was used, again as an example of a mellophone. Indeed, the word mellophone, which means what, sweet sound, smooth sound, honey sound, was applied also to the English Concertina when it was first played by Giulio Rigondi himself in 1841 on the continent. The 48-key system was really standard right the way through from about 1844. Some of the earlier instruments that Rigondi first played on had fewer keys. They lacked a couple of the bass notes. But the arrangements he played on those instruments were altered with the arrival of the 48-key system, so that they were extended down a little bit.
I'm looking with the light behind the reed to check that the gap round the reed is uniform. The problem with the whole system is that it's a brass tube with a steel frame, and they've got different coefficients of expansion. Nice. So on a hot day the brass will expand more than the steel and will close the reeds down. Mm. It's amazing. When did we decide this one was made? This is 1920 something, isn't it?
Earlier than that, actually.
Is it? Yeah. The reed has got to be tight there and tight there.
Yeah.
But also it's got to be in line.
Yeah.
So if you put a little packer there, you're putting a force on the reed there which will bend it. So now for the 5th time, is it, we put it back together?
I lost count already.
Let's just check and see if it's...
Twin is changing around all the time.
That's fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Quite a lot of professional players, when they're doing a recording, will bring the instrument in a couple of days before the recording to sort of have it all gone through and all these kind of problems sorted out. I mean, to me, that instrument's perfectly playable. To Pauline, she requires something of that particular note that can be sorted, but you know, how long do you take doing it, and how much are you trying to refine what's going on to the point that it's beyond the working parameters of the instrument. See, some people want to play Irish jigs and reels.
Yes.
And they want it to be loud. Well, you can't have a box that's loud and play quickly.
No.
It's you know, the two don't go together.
Yeah.
So you've got to make a compromise with the way you set the reeds for the volume that you want.
Jij moet ertussen straks zitten. Huh? Oh, die is af.
Ja, die
je hebt
moet
niet
even...
gelijk. Ja.
Oh, die is niet helemaal gelijk. Dan moet even die laten.
Ja.
Ja.
Ja, nou dat is gelukt. Slentando is ook langzamer worden, zie je. Maar straschinato is slepend. Ja, nou dus ik met die noot zo hoog, dan moet hij naar boven komen, hè?
Ja.
Zoiets.
4.
I mean, an instrument like Pauline's in 1920 would have cost 46 guineas. That's £50. Well, the average working wage was £1.50 a week.
Okay.
So you can see, if you project that forward to what the average working wage today is, you can see how much an instrument would have cost half a year's earnings. You know, the average wage in Britain is 25,000 probably, you could say. So a concertina, if it was the same price as then, would be costing, you know, £10,000 to £15,000. Well, they don't. I wish I could get £10,000 to £15,000 for them, but so they were very expensive. And then you got the 1920s depression. People couldn't afford them.
Yeah. So then the popularity went down.
So the popularity went right down. There were other forms of entertainment. You didn't stand around the piano on a Sunday afternoon singing "Come Into the Garden, Maud." Society had changed with the First World War, and this concertina never really recovered until the 70s with the folk music revival.
George Rowe, he wrote some very good little pieces for concertina in the 1890s. His little gavotte, which I think you know,
Yeah.
a very charming little piece. Miss Eugenie Chidley. Now, the Chidleys were long connected with the concertina. Rock Chidley was one of the leading stars of concertina manufacture. I think ran Wheatstones in the latter years, in the 1870s, 80s.
People played them in the music halls in the 1890s and before the First World War because it was portable on stage. Well, the music hall died really by the 20s. There was no... That form of entertainment was, you know, old.
Yeah.
People didn't do it. The concertina didn't fit into the modern technological age. But in its day, it was the synthesizer of the day.
Regondi was a guitarist, and he was already very advanced at the age of 8 or 9 and was playing in all the courts of Europe. He was already a virtuoso. Regondi had a house, or lived here for a year in 1854. And you may say, well, how do I know this? I don't have to go to any public records. I just look up in the magazines of the time for the concert performances, and the tickets were to be had for the various concertina performances he gave from either Wheatstone themselves at 20 Conduit Street or from Giulio Regondi himself at, and there's the address often given, 22 Manchester Square. So here we are, along here. 19. Regondi went with his so-called father. That was another story in itself, whether it really was his father, the older Regondi, to Wheatstone, the firm of Wheatstone in Conduit Street, one morning, 1831, 1832. He arrived in England first in 1831. And he was shown this new instrument. And the older Regondi, was asked by Wheatstone, what can we do with this? It's almost a leading question, isn't it? Because the older guy would say, well, I'm sure my son, Giulio, can bring out all the possibilities. At which point, apparently, Giulio, a small, delicate boy, was seated on the table, and Wheatstone's sister had a concertina, put it in his hands, and showed him the fingering. And the rest is history. Here, this is very early music. You can see by the original pressing around here, it belongs to the 1840s or 50s, by John Leslie, Le Premier Pensée Musicale, comprising a collection of original waltzes and polkas for the concertina. This was composed in the 1840s. You know, it's funny, isn't it? The wonderful effort they went into. You know, as far as its repertoire is concerned, it's got an enormous repertoire of 800 or 900 quite big works. 6 concertos, for example. And I've heard accordionists try to call the concertina an ancestor of the accordion. Oh no, it's not. You know, it has its own particular valid line. And here's the Manchester Free Trade Hall in 1861. On the tour of Britain, 1861, this is where they all played. And somewhere here, I have a photograph of it. Incredibly, this photograph was taken in 1861. And if you look very carefully at the poster, you'll see one that hasn't been removed properly. No, I'm kidding. I'm afraid it's not there. It's gone. But what a shame. We could have actually had a photograph, couldn't we, of the poster. That wouldn't have been a wonderful coincidence, but it's pretty close. brings it to life, doesn't it? Yeah, that's the interior, 1843, so that was a short time before Rogondi first played there. Almost all the buildings in this square, unfortunately, have changed. Again, this was a Georgian square. It goes way back to the 1750s. And the Hanover Square Rooms, which we'll see as we come around the corner, was one of those buildings that was built up, demolished in 1900, unfortunately. And it stopped being a concert hall about 1876. But it was one of the main concert rooms of London. It was on the first floor. And I'll show you as we get around the corner. It's now, I think, a Japanese store. It's been altered entirely. There's the Hanover Square Rooms in its original form from the exterior, one of the very few illustrations of it. This is the Hanover Square Rooms interior. This is one of the most prominent concert halls in the concertina's life, where a lot of the great players, Rogondi especially, twice or once a year would put on a benefit concert for his admirers and fans. There was the stage, the organ and so on. Apparently the story was that players used to come on wearing a sword. That was tradition, maybe to defend themselves against irate punters. But when Rogondi used to play there, it was apparently absolutely crowded out with about 800 people. Pretty darn stifling. All the great players of the past played there. Haydn visited the place when he was over. That's where Hanover Square Rooms stood. And the entrance is over there somewhere in Hanover Street. And it had some chimneys to try and ventilate the place because it got pretty hot. It held about 800 people. And this was always full for Rogondi's concerts. And this is where he would have come. Who knows, from Conway Street with his concertinas, his new concertinas just tuned for him by Rock Chudley, and walked along there with his friends into the concert hall to do his business, wearing the sword, of course, of the performer as he went on the stage. All the operatic composers of the time, like Donizetti and Bellini and Verdi later on and so on, all these works by these people, and all the operas, Norma, for example, and Don Pasquale, all these works with all these themes that everyone would have loved and known because they were played, I don't know, by barrel organ players in the streets even. They were sung by tenors on street corners, in shops. All these arrangements were made for piano people to play, for flautists and so on. So these were the common pieces of the time that people generally in the middle upper classes would have known. And in order to please those audiences, you play the tunes they know. Oh yes, well that's interesting because that is a photograph of Rogondi taken about 1868, which as far as I know the world of Rogondi interest doesn't know about. This is Rogondi's death certificate, and Giulio Rogondi of 17 Portsea Place. The grave number is 1509, so you can easily find it. On Monday the 6th of May 1872, in a little house near Hyde Park, Giulio Rogondi breathed his last. Amazing how long he stayed here. 9 years. All the other addresses he stayed for a matter of months or a year at most. I still believe he practiced too much. But actually, isn't that gloriously original there? And there's the original front door and the original windows. I don't see anything much changed. What we'll try and do, I think now, is to imagine that morning, Monday, 6th of May, well, a couple of days later, when Rogondi's funeral cortege left the house here and travelled along Harrow Road to Kensal Green Cemetery. So we're going to follow that route. All the reports of all the concerts of Rogondi, and I've got so many of them which were produced in the musical world, and the reports of the concerts of George Case and Blagrove, and if I look at the leaflets that Blagrove published in order to publicise his later concerts in the 1880s and 90s, you hear them all crying out the same cry, which was, the concertina is respectable. You know, please understand that. Please believe in this instrument. That's Rogondi's grave there. It's a nice big solid stone, pretty expensive. make sure he can't get out. Age 49 years, as he understood it. I mean, he reckoned he was born in 1822, and that was the wisdom. Of course, the tendency would be in those days, if he were a prodigy, which he was on the guitar, to make him seem younger than he really was. And he died aged 49. It may be because of the demise of Rigondi, the imminent demise of Rigondi by 1868-69, that one could get the impression that the concertina by then was on its way out as a concert instrument. Because of the portability instrument, its completeness, the fact it produces its own harmony, isn't it an ideal instrument to take on a trip with you? And when you trip around, where do you go? Well, yes, on a punt, on a train, and on a boat. So it may well be it became a sailor's instrument. The sailor might be carrying his duffel bag, whatever it was, and in there, somewhere at the bottom, was his little concertina.
We step and we cast, old times on the wing, and would you partake of harvest joys? The corn must be sown in spring, so steady and sure again, measure of stroke and step we keep, thus up and down we cast our grain, so well, and you shall gladly reap. Now hands to the sea, sheep boys, we step and we cast, old times on the wing, and would partake of harvest joys, the corn must be sown in spring. Now hands to the sea, sheep boys, we step and we cast, old times on the wing, and would partake of harvest joys, the corn must be sown in spring.
Today, I think, for my own part, to sell what I do to impresarios, people who put on concerts and so on, the general idea that I have to fight against in the world within which I want to promote the instrument is that it's a folk instrument. People have it in mind, as you mentioned earlier, that it belongs in the hands of sailors, it's on barges, in Morris dances and so on, and they find the idea of a classical form of it just eccentric.
Your tongue will actually do a triplet in a place. Once you've listened to a lot of Irish music, it all goes in there and comes out again sometimes. So it's about the rhythm. And with jigs, it's like a bit of a gallop, the shoulders. And it's you sort of hang on to the note, when you lift the shoulder. So we'll do it really slow, but we keep in that rhythm. not as nice as. That's it. So it's just a difference. Just very slight differences in just that simple triplet. I mean, lilt it, if it helps to lilt, you know, you have to find the ornamentation by lilting it. You know, yourself humming it or lilting it. And sometimes the ornamentations come naturally, and then if you can find it on your concertina, that's good. It's just a difference again that you can make in a tune. Yeah? Mostly ornamentations I've found they tend to use a note above.
Right. So you're going up and
It's
then back down.
usually like that. The
Right.
cut note is usually, you know, if you're going to think of the shape of the tune,
Yes.
the shape of the note,
Right.
it nearly always goes like that. With a roll, with certain rolls, it actually goes up and dips down and comes up.
Right. Back to where you were.
So you've got da 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 da.
Mm.
G A. You've got G A. Push draw. Draw push. Push draw. Draw push. And those, with most tunes that you'll play in, you know, learning the Irish tunes on Anglo Concertina, it is these two fingers and those four buttons that are the most important. So push, draw, draw, push, push, draw, push. That's the key of tune. So you don't often play more than, say, 2 or 3, 4 maximum notes in the same direction. That's the idea. Listen a lot to recordings, so that it's in your, you know, your head how it should sound. And one of the tricks to change the bellows quickly is to not go like that. Try and use your shoulders. Try to keep your hands and fingers relaxed. You have to have a certain amount of tension in your wrists, but try and use your shoulders to actually move the bellows. You get a much better sound if you go rather than like that.
Du musst der Pianist auch lassen.
Ja.
Warum? bin eine Artistenfamilie allgemein.
Ja.
Mit 6 Personen. Mit Vater, Mutter und 4 Kinder.
Ja.
Und meine Mutter es ist schon die 3. Generation.
Ja.
Ja, ist in Rom geboren. Von einem auch Leute. Ne?
Ja.
Und wir sind nach Russland gefahren, weil da in Italien war wenig Arbeit. Und wir sind nach Russland gefahren. Da gab es die beste Schule für Ballett und alles. Ja. Aber meine Mutter war schon von der Vater ein bisschen so präpariert.
Ja.
Nicht? Der war auch Dirigent,
Ja.
der Großvater, ein Zirkus. Aber das war trotzdem gut. Aber meine Mutter nach Rom ist sie in Kiew gegangen. Kiew in Russland, wo sie alles das gelernt hat und so weiter. Und die haben nach 18 Jahren, da gab es die Pogrom, die Revolution, die sind weggegangen nach die andere, wie heißt das?
Ja.
Finnland.
Finnland.
Und da war noch einmal wieder Revolution. Und wir sind gelandet in Paris.
Ja.
Que reste-t-il de nos amours? Que reste-t-il de ces beaux jours? Une photo, vieille photo de ma jeunesse. Que reste-t-il des billets doux, des mois
Wenn
d'avril?
mein Vater nicht mehr da war, habe ich mit der Xylophon begleitet. Apropos Concertina, das habe ich gesehen von meiner Mutter, weil die hatte mehrere Instrumente, habe es gehört. Ne? Ja, schöne Gitarre gehabt, Hawaii-Gitarre, Cello. Ne? Aber die hat wirklich gespielt und nicht und dann fertig. Ne? Nein. Und ich habe gesagt, Mama, ich will die Concertina machen. Ich sage, ja, jetzt kannst du. Akkordeon haben schon, das ist mein Vater, das genügt. Ne? Und das genügt. Und ich habe alles probiert, Ballett, da war ich sowieso gut. Und Akrobat auch. Aber Silo und Katrine nichts. Ich habe gesagt, warum? Mein Bruder, der so musikalisch ist, der macht das nicht. Ja, gut, dann mache ich. Also erstmal habe ich die Tonleiter lernen müssen.
Ja.
Das war für meine Mutter auch so.
Ja.
Und ich bedanke dafür, weil manche im Zirkus, die spielen Concertina, das ist katastrophal. Und dann hat sie gesagt, so, do re mi fa sol la si do. Und dann war fertig. Und dann sagt sie, ja gut, jetzt musst du eine Nummer lesen, klassisch, was dir gefällt. Und dann machst du das auswendig. Also, ne, ohne Not nachher.
Ja.
Weil wir gehen auf die Bühne,
Ja.
also nicht die Not.
Ja.
Und das war Anton Dvorak.
Vorschlag, ja.
Bam, padam, 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 padi, padi, padam, pida. Wissen Sie warum? Weil ich das getanzt habe, das in Ballett, der
Ach,
Nummer.
Ja.
Genau, ja. Nicht sofort, nicht so laut, das ist fein. Ja. Ja, genau. Mehr von Otto habe ich gelernt, nicht von den anderen. Nein. Der hat ein paar Nummern schon in der CD, wo das ist total Klassik. Da gibt es das von Chopin und da singt das so, weil der hat er richtig gelernt.
Ja.
Und er schaut überhaupt nie. Er spielt so, da.
Ja.
Er hört nur. Da.
Ja.
Mir hörte wir. auch hören, bevor er fertig,
Ja.
da gibt es die Septim. Da, 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 bom, da, da, auf.
Ja.
Da gibt es ein Dings ein,
Ja.
wo man das.
Ja.
Bei, da, bom, bi, bom, bom, bom.
Ja.
Das ist der Final von der Septim oder sowas. Also was genau, das du auf Wiedersehen sagen.
Ja.
Viele Leute haben gesagt, kann man ein Jazz mit Dance machen? Ich
Ja.
habe gesagt, mit jedem Instrument. Das kommt darauf an, wer sie spielt. Oder?
Ja.
Ja.
Richtig.
Bum, 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 ne?
Ja.
Alles kann man spielen. Und dann, da, 4 oder 6, nicht? Damit er lernt, er muss da
Tonleiter.
das Gefühl haben. Nein, er hat auch Gefühl für die Concertina.
Ja.
Sonst er geht immer dazwischen.
Ja.
Von Litz. Das ist so, die erste ist schon zu hart.
Ja.
Ja, schon da. Du darfst nichts geben.
Ja.
Und wenn du zu machst, Schluss, dasselbe. Das hast du gestoppt.
Ja.
Nein, das musst du weitergehen.
Nochmal. Und jetzt verstehe ich, glaube ich, was Sie meinen. Warte mal, muss ich nochmal versuchen.
Langsam. Falsch. Tonen.
Habe ich nicht gehört.
Dat maakt het wel op. Ja.
Every time I see you go, all my heart cries out to you. Every time you leave me here, all
Dat was
alone.
goed, dat was mooi om
Ja.
die cassette te laten liggen.
Ja, ik deed hem eigenlijk per ongeluk.
Ja.
Het klonk
En dan
goed.
hier E, F. Dan is deze
Dan
even
krijg ik dus C en dan hier G wel, of niet?
Nee, Sam laten
Toch
liggen.
laten
Dus kan
liggen,
drie
helemaal
lang-
C,
ja.
E, F. Ik heb
Jouw eerste noot is een...
D.
En je had hem net hoog, hè? Ja. Precies, nee, laag is mooi. Ja. En dan wordt het een, wat was het, C? En dan toch een lage E, denk ik.
Nee. Nee, hè?
Every time I see you go, all my heart cries out to you. Every time you leave me here, all alone. Where
very rapidly in the 1840s, you've got 48 key instruments, which have exactly the same range as the frettable fingerboard on a fiddle, and it was put out as a mechanical fiddle. I mean, Wheatstone even invented a bellows-powered fiddle. It's bizarre. I've seen it, and you know, the mind boggles really. But the concertina was such a portable, easy to carry around thing, and you got bigger range of keys into baritone range. You could have a treble instrument, a tenor instrument, a baritone instrument and a bass instrument. So the instruments are actually competing with the standard string quartet.
You know, if you have one of these early instruments, you play some of that fast music today, you find the sharp flat end buttons are rather cutting on the fingertip, very uncomfortable. You can't slip around over the buttons so easily. You find the clattering noise much greater. You find the sound slower to speak and not quite so vibrant and cutting. And yet, you know, when you first take up an instrument like that, it seems so, especially if you're used to a more modern instrument. But as you get used to it, you learn how to touch it in the right sort of way to bring out its best qualities. This one here, I think it's the one, actually was the only concertina known to have been owned by Regondi. I think that's the one there. I've never found one. The concertina never really changed very much after the 1844 patent. It seems to have arrived at its sound, its mechanism. There were minor improvements that made it less noisy, perhaps.
Some more technical aspects.
Yeah, that's right. But the basic instrument was there. Later on, there were extended instruments being used increasingly, so that you get higher notes. You go up to the very, very highest notes. A reed so small you can hardly see it without a magnifying glass, and yet with huge sound and intriguing, ringing qualities.
The word Wheatstone concertina is synonymous with the Wheatstone fingering system. The Irish will call an English concertina a Wheatstone concertina, whereas in England we call it an English system, whereas that's the Anglo-German system, or a duet system. But the Irish will call an English concertina a Wheatstone concertina.
For me, anyway, I mean, I'm prejudiced about this, but the one that's the most versatile one, I think, is the English fingering system, which is used for folk music a great deal. In many different ways. It can be used as a kind of bland instrument, just playing jigs and reels. You open the instrument to play one phrase, and you close it to play another. But you can also play it like the Anglo. You can push and pull for every single note. The advantage of the English fingering system is that you get the same note on the push and pull, and you can use the movement of the bellows just as a violinist would use the bow, up and down bows. And it is capable of quite extended harmonies if you're skillful.
Because of its push-pull nature, it's got a sort of a lift. And for dance music, an Anglo is wonderful. But equally so, you can play an English concertina in exactly the same style. That's musicianship. The Anglo helps you. It's got a predisposition towards that kind of rhythmic dance music. But there's no reason why you can't play classical music on an Anglo.
Really, it's called the Anglo-German system because it did develop from an early form of mouth organ, which is you get different note push and pull. And that is another thing that man on the street, as it were, could understand, because that's how a mouth organ works. And the Anglo concertina, you have wrist straps, you push and pull the thing according to the note you want. So you pull, goes one note, push a different note. And because of the movement constantly with the wrists, it has a very vibrant, rhythmic, attacking, loud sound, and is now used mostly by ear players who don't tend to read music onto it so much.
The duet, which is like an English concertina but with all the bass on one side and the treble on the other, is probably the ultimate development, I think. It can encompass so many different styles of music, but the English concertina is unique in that all the notes that you will find in spaces on a treble clef are on the right hand side, and all the notes on lines are on the left hand side. And you need to be a bit schizophrenic really, because alternate notes go on alternate sides, alternate chords are on alternate sides.
But that makes it play more quickly.
Yeah, Well, you can actually play a fast-moving piece of music 4 times quicker than you would think you can.
So it's suggested with that instrument, because it's difficult to rush around the place, that you might do more slow, more extended harmony sort of piano pieces. Yeah, but okay. Yeah, let's try a new approach. Let's treat this more as a dance. Dum ba ba bum, yonder ya ba ba da. So what we'll do now, if we're going to change on the half bar, is to put more accent in. So, that's the one. It's got a little accent marked in there. In Percy Scholl's Encyclopedia of Music, when he talks about the concertina, he says a lot of concertina players reckon that if you swing the instrument around, it improves the tone, and they have this strange way of doing it. And I remember once, in fact, I gave a concert, and the critic said that I swayed around. I think he'd read that same report and was reading into what I was doing. That same sentence, because I don't sway around. The implication being you just do this all the time. Well, there is one piece where you swing it around in order to get a bell-like sound, and it's very fascinating and quite powerful. But as far as moving instruments around, well, a conductor moves to conduct, so he doesn't just sway in 2/4 time all the time. And I feel that the movement in the concertina is very much a matter of the body language of what the piece itself and the phrasing and the expression and the attack demands, and that's why I would do it. The idea of just swinging for the sake of swinging, no, I don't think, you don't necessarily get opera singers swinging like a beer cellar, kind of jolly approach. No, it's not necessarily right. So I think the important thing in these kind of gestures is to choose the right gesture for the right context.
Think about the instrumental playing as fingers and not as a musical gesture. So if you take them away from the instrument and you rehearse, for example, the phrasing of the piece that they're playing in big movement with materials like that I'm using, like the scarf or the ball or whatever it is, away from the instrument, you change the way they're thinking about the piece. So they're thinking about it in terms of musical gesture and not in terms of sort of digitation. And then when they come back to play, they're trying to make that gesture on the instrument, and quite often the technical problems disappear. This business of clarifying to yourself how it sounds and what it feels like, then you've got your time, and off on the next one. Can you see her hands? Tita. And you stop here and even shorten this note. Climbing, and it's like you fall off the cliff. Part of that then means putting in the connection between time and space, the duration and the space, if you like. So, for example, if you're clapping a very fast pulse, you're making quite a small movement, but if you're clapping a slow one, you're going to fill the space rather than going and then waiting sort of thing. It's a gestural thing, so that your muscles can remember what that feels like and reproduce it. For example, if you've had a change of tempo and then you have to come back to that one. You have to put in things about dynamics, accentuation, sustained movement for duration and for phrasing, changes of weight and energy, meter. And very quickly, when you start to work on meter, you discover that most people think that metrical accentuation means making the first beat heavier in some way, but in real music it isn't necessarily like that. Think about if a singer did it, what would they do? You know, they would give that note just a little bit more time. So you allow it to speak. And then having stretched so much that you want to perhaps give that note a little bit more time. And the next time, when you're in the third phrase, you're doing it very well now. I think a lot of people learn their instrument as a sort of technical thing. They whiz up and down without necessarily saying anything with it. And a lot of people learn their musical rudiments as, for example, rhythm pattern as duration pattern. But rhythm is not only duration. It includes duration, but it also includes changes of weight and energy and articulation. Dalcroze wrote that the aim of the training was to create a communications network within the person that is quick, effective and light. And what that means really is that you can do what you want to do easily, you know, whether it's play a particular tricky rhythm, whether it's create a nice sustained phrase that balances well with the other phrases, whether it's ensemble playing with somebody else. And the way that this communications network is created is through physical participation. So you're not just thinking or reading or being told, you're doing it. Training is training the connections between your senses, your brain and your body. So your ear, eye, touch, all those senses. Your brain and how it informs your nerves and then your muscles what to do, and developing the right sort of control so that you can do it easily. And your mind in the sense of how you think about music, and all that together with other people, obviously. And in order to maximize the experience you have in the class, you have to do it in a big space and travel about. You're not just sitting at a desk, you're controlling your energy, your weight, how you use time and space. So starting off by working in big space with big movement, using large muscles, if you like, and that creates a very strong picture, for example, of what it's like to do 2 against 3, or to be in 4 times as opposed to 6, 8. And that knowledge then that you have becomes internalized, so that you know what that thing is, what it feels like by experience, and you can reproduce it in playing. Let's do this with the tennis ball.
With the tennis ball.
You're going to start and you're going to draw, not with the scarf, but with the ball, how you want that phrase to sound. So you put it there and you must wait. Next phrase. Yeah. The movement in space, the control of yourself, your weight and your muscles, in connection with rhythm, phrase, musical intention, all these things. When you have a lot of experiences about that, that creates information which you have in your mind, in your brain, however you want to talk about that. And then, supposing you've been skipping, you want to play a tune that skips and has elevation. You have a very good reference for that. You've done it. You know what it feels like. You can play Little Scherzo because you know that sensation.